You are holding something old, cool to the touch, beautiful. You have no idea it was designed to kill you. That is the premise of this investigation. Not superstition, not folklore passed down through centuries of embellishment, 10 ancient objects with documented body counts, and the question that modern science has only partially answered. Why do these things keep killing the people who find them? The answer is not because they're cursed. The answer is stranger than that. These objects have second functions, functions that were either known to their creators and forgotten, or never understood in the first place. A diamond that operates as a semiconductor, a tomb that operates as a biological weapon, a pair of bronze horns that may function as an acoustic trigger for mass aggression, a ring that was used as a legally binding contract with a god. Each of these things has killed. Each of the deaths is documented, and in case after case, the official explanation, bad luck, confirmation bias, coincidence, quietly stops working when you line up the facts in order. Start counting. On the night of April 9th, 1939, a young musician pressed a 3,000-year-old piece of silver to his lips in a darkened museum in Cairo. The building's electricity had failed minutes before the broadcast was set to begin. British Broadcasting Corporation technicians scrambled with candles, checking cables, adjusting microphones. 150 million people across the globe were already tuned in and waiting. He blew. The sound that came out traveled instantly to every radio receiver on Earth. The two instruments he played, one silver, one bronze, recovered from the burial chamber of the boy pharaoh and silent for over 3,000 years, had an official function: military signaling. Each produces exactly two notes, a root and a fifth. That is precisely enough to transmit unambiguous commands across a battlefield without confusion. You don't need melody, you need clarity. The silver instrument cracked apart during rehearsal. Not from decay, not from the grip of the musician's hands. It simply fractured under the vibration of its own sound, as if whatever it had been holding in for 30 centuries released all at once. A replica was sourced. The broadcast continued. 5 months later, Germany invaded Poland. One coincidence is easy to dismiss. It happened 4 more times. In June of 1967, another performance in Cairo. 12 days later, the Six-Day War erupted. In 1990, a museum staff member played the instrument during a routine inspection. The Gulf War followed within weeks. In 2011, an employee played the bronze instrument in a storage room. 1 week later, the uprising in Tahrir Square began. The bronze instrument was stolen during the riots. It was returned 3 months later, wrapped in newspaper. No note, no explanation. Mohammed El-Biali, Egypt's head of archaeological sites, stated publicly that museum staff now require explicit authorization before touching either instrument. He gave no reason why. In 2016, an acoustic study confirmed something that gives all of this a different shape. In an enclosed space, these instruments produce standing waves at frequencies associated with disorientation, elevated heart rate, and heightened aggression. The geometry of the bells, the length of the tubes, the specific ratio of metal thickness, all of it points in one direction. Whether that direction was intentional is a question the study declined to answer. The British Broadcasting Corporation's internal file on the 1939 broadcast is still accessible in the London Archive. It contains a single annotation, added sometime after September of that year. The annotation reads, "Anomalous event. Nothing follows it." The official position is synchronicity, confirmation bias. The world is always at war somewhere. The instruments have not been played since 2011. In 2025, researchers at the University of Pennsylvania announced that a modified compound derived from a fungal strain had increased the kill rate of leukemia cells by a factor of 100. The compound came from a 3,000-year-old Egyptian tomb, the same tomb that killed the people who opened it. That is the actual story of the pharaoh's curse. The burial chamber designated KV62 in the Valley of the Kings, sealed in 1323 BCE and opened on November 4, 1922, contained over 5,000 artifacts and something the excavation team had no way to see. Lord Carnarvon, the British aristocrat who funded Howard Carter's expedition, entered the tomb and died 4 months later. Pneumonia, following an infected insect bite. At the precise moment of his death in Cairo, the city's electric grid failed completely. His dog, 4,000 miles away in England, reportedly died at the same hour. Howard Carter, the lead archaeologist, the man most exposed to the tomb's interior, lived another 17 years. That asymmetry is the key to the whole case. A decade after Tutankhamun's discovery, archaeologists opened the burial chamber of the Polish king Casimir IV in Krakow. 12 scientists entered. 10 died within months of each other. The cause identified retrospectively: Aspergillus flavus, a soil fungus that in sealed, oxygen-deprived environments produces aflatoxins, compounds that cause liver failure, pulmonary edema, and immune collapse. The brown patches on the walls of the Tutankhamun burial chamber are not pigment degradation. They are 3,000-year-old bacterial colonies, still metabolically active when Carter's team entered in 1922, feeding on the oil, linen, and organic food offerings sealed inside for 32 centuries. Howard Carter was a heavy smoker. Tobacco use, counterintuitively, appears to suppress certain immune pathways that aflatoxins exploit in non-smokers. Lord Carnarvon did not smoke. The correlation held for multiple team members. The mainstream explanation is coherent. The curse is a fungal bloom. The deaths are not mysterious. They are biological. And this explanation would close the case entirely, except for what happened next. The same Aspergillus flavus strain, extracted from the tomb's wall samples and studied for decades in university laboratories, was found to selectively target leukemia cells when its molecular structure is modified at the ribotoxin level. The pathogen that collapsed Lord Carnarvon's respiratory system is being engineered to save the lives of blood cancer patients. What Egyptian archaeologists have debated since this discovery is whether the concentration of organic material in the sealed chamber was accidental preservation or deliberate design. The tomb was packed with far more organic matter than any ritual requirement would explain: food, floral offerings, mummification oils, linen. Enough to sustain a microbial ecosystem for 3,000 years. No investigation into this question has been formally commissioned. He was found face down in a glacier, and the first hikers who spotted him assumed they were looking at a recent accident victim. The call to police in September of 1991 brought investigators to the Ötztal Alps on the Italian-Austrian border, where they found a man approximately 45 years old, frozen since roughly 3300 BCE. He had been murdered. An arrowhead had severed his subclavian artery. He bled out in minutes. The arrowhead was still inside his shoulder when researchers removed him from the ice. He is called Ötzi. He is the most analyzed human being who has ever existed. In 30 years of study, the findings have accumulated into something that strains the standard narrative of Stone Age life considerably. 61 tattoos on his skin, not artistic, positioned with less than 3 centimeters of variance over the acupuncture points used in modern Chinese and Tibetan medicine to treat lower back pain, joint degeneration, and gastrointestinal disorders, all 3 of which Ötzi demonstrably suffered from. The tattoos were made by rubbing charcoal into precise incisions. This is a therapeutic technique. It predates the first documented acupuncture records in China by 2,000 years. In his equipment, a bracket fungus from birch trees with established anti-parasitic and antibiotic properties. Ötzi had intestinal parasites. He was treating them with precision in 3300 BCE in the Alps. His copper axe had a purity of 99.7%. That requires controlled smelting technology we have no other record of for this period in Alpine Europe. Now the list. Helmut Simon, the man who found Ötzi, fell to his death in the same Alps in 2003. He was an experienced mountaineer. Rainer Henn, the forensic pathologist who placed Ötzi in a body bag during initial recovery, died in a car crash 6 months after the discovery. Kurt Fritz, the mountain guide who led the body down from the ridge, was killed in an avalanche the following year. Konrad Spindler, the first scientist to publicly analyze and identify the mummy, died of multiple sclerosis at 61. A documentary filmmaker covering the investigation died of a brain tumor. A gendarmerie investigator died of a heart attack. A museum official connected to the transfer process died in unexplained circumstances. 7 names. 13 years. The deaths themselves are not the strange part. Mountains are dangerous. Scientists have car accidents. People die. What's unusual is the timing. Every person in this sequence died within months, sometimes weeks, of a documented moment of direct contact. Hen placed him in the body bag and was killed in a car crash 6 months later. Simon climbed the same ridge again, 12 years after the discovery, and didn't come back. Read the deaths separately and nothing seems wrong. Read them as a sequence, and the math becomes uncomfortable. The South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology lists each cause of death separately in their official documentation: accident, illness, natural causes. The museum has never published a list of all 7 together. Meanwhile, the mummy himself lies in a refrigerated chamber at -6 degrees Celsius. His last meal has been reconstructed from stomach contents: red deer, ibex, einkorn wheat, sloe berries. He ate well, less than an hour before the arrow hit. He was not running when it struck. He was resting. Begin with what we know. In the summer of 1993, archaeologist Natalia Polismak was excavating a burial mound on the Ukok Plateau in the Altai Mountains of southern Russia. At 2 meters depth, her team struck a layer of ice. Under the ice was a coffin of larch. Inside the coffin was a woman, preserved in extraordinary condition, dead for 2,500 years. She was buried with 6 horses, fully saddled and equipped, a pouch of cannabis, a bronze mirror of Chinese manufacture, food prepared for a long journey, and a silk blouse that came from India. The Silk Road, the network connecting East Asia to the Mediterranean, was not established according to standard historical consensus until the 2nd century BCE. This woman was buried in the 5th century BCE, 3 centuries earlier, in a region as remote as any on the continent. Indian silk on an Altai plateau, 300 years before we say the road existed. Either someone is wrong about the dates, or there was a network connecting Siberia to the Indian subcontinent that we haven't fully traced yet. Now add the medical file. Magnetic resonance imaging scans of the mummy conducted in 2012 revealed she had breast cancer in its terminal stage. The cannabis in her burial pouch was not ceremonial. Analysis by the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences identified its composition as consistent with systematic pain management, the kind of dosing that implies knowledge of therapeutic thresholds, not casual use. She was managing terminal cancer pain with calibrated doses of cannabis. 2,500 years ago, in the mountains of Siberia. Consider what that requires. Not just knowledge of the compound, but knowledge of dosing, the gap between relief and incapacitation, the threshold that separates medicine from poison. That is not folk knowledge. That is a developed pharmacological practice. Where she acquired it and who taught her has never been traced. Traces of mercury and copper were found in her lung tissue. She was inhaling a compound that combined those 2 metals as part of a regular practice. The same combination appears in Altaic shamanic traditions as a method of inducing altered perceptual states. Her skull had been opened after death, the brain removed and replaced with a mixture of herbs, animal fur, and pine resin. Someone performed cranial balsaming on her corpse with considerable anatomical knowledge. She was preserved with intention and care. The Altai people of the region identify her as a guardian figure, keeper of the mountain pass. When she was removed from the plateau in 1993, their community began formally petitioning for her return. In 2003, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck the Altai region. The Russian government moved her to a purpose-built mausoleum in Gorno-Altaysk. She was not returned to the plateau. The earthquakes continued. You cannot visit the most dangerous burial site on Earth. The Chinese government will not allow it. Not because of logistics, not because of conservation constraints, because of the mercury. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang, who unified China in 221 BCE and became its first emperor, sits beneath a hill in Shanxi province, 47 meters underground. The historian Sima Qian, writing 1 century after the emperor's death, described its interior, a replica of the empire, complete with rivers of mercury flowing through channels by mechanical means, with a ceiling of pearls representing stars. Above, a terracotta army of 8,000 soldiers. Soil samples taken above the burial mound in 1981 measured mercury concentration at 1,500 parts per billion. The safe environmental limit is 30 parts per billion. The contaminated areas are not uniformly distributed. When mapped, the high concentration zones form a precise pattern. They correspond to the locations of China's major rivers as they existed in 221 BCE. The Yangtze, the Yellow River, the Wei. The tomb contains a geographic model of the empire's hydraulic infrastructure, reproduced in 100 metric tons of liquid metal beneath a hill in Shanxi. Qin Shi Huang died in 210 BCE, almost certainly from mercury poisoning. He had been consuming what his court alchemists labeled pills of immortality. The pills contained mercury. The man who filled his tomb with 100 metric tons of liquid metal died drinking it by the gram. The central burial chamber remains intact and unopened. In 2003, the Chinese government denied a request from Japanese researchers to drill a test bore through the outer mound. In 2015, a second request was denied. No public explanation was offered for either decision. The drainage system surrounding the mound, a clay dam with underground channels designed to prevent water table contamination, is still functioning. It has functioned for 2,200 years without human maintenance. The engineers who designed it are not named in any record. Their identities, like the contents of the mound itself, were sealed inside. In 1929, a British archaeologist named Mortimer Wheeler, excavating a temple site at Lydney Park in Gloucestershire, needed help with an unusual linguistic problem. A lead tablet found at the dig contained a dedication to a god whose name Wheeler could not definitively identify. He needed an expert in Romano-British divine etymology. He wrote to J.R.R. Tolkien. What Tolkien was consulted on was the grammar of a curse. A formal curse inscribed in 4th century Latin on a lead sheet approximately 15 centimeters long. The text read, in part, "Among those who bear the name Senicianus, do not allow health until he brings the ring to the temple of Nodens." The ring in question had been found 110 kilometers away, in a field near the Roman town of Caleva Atrebatum, modern Silchester, in 1785. A large gold signet ring. 12 grams, 10-sided, an engraving of Venus on the face. On the inner surface, crudely engraved with visible signs of alteration. Senicianus, live in God. The name Senicianus appears in almost no other Romano-British record. It is a statistically improbable coincidence for it to appear twice, on a ring and on a curse tablet, authenticated independently 110 kilometers apart. The obvious reading is that these objects belong to the same event, a theft, a curse, and a panicked attempt by the thief to neutralize it. Silvianus lost the ring. He filed a legal contract with the god Nodens. Half the ring's value pledged to the deity in exchange for the thief's ruin until the ring was returned. Senicianus, apparently aware of this, had new lettering carved into the gold, attempting to overwrite the pagan curse with a Christian blessing. Consider the thief's behavior. Senicianus had a gold ring worth more than most people earned in a year. The rational move for any thief is to melt down the metal and sell it in unmarked form. He didn't melt it. He paid someone to engrave new words into it instead. A Christian blessing laid over the pagan inscription, as if the new god might override the old contract. That is not greed working. That is the behavior of a man who believed the object was watching him, and that walking away without neutralizing it was not an option. The ring was never returned to the temple. It passed through English estates for centuries and now sits in a glass case at the Vine in Hampshire. Open to the public on weekdays,
Tolkien never formally confirmed that this ring inspired his fiction. The parallels are not subtle. A cursed golden object. A thief who cannot escape it. A supernatural contract that cannot be voided by changing the words. The archaeologists at Lydney Park, when asked repeatedly since the 1960s, give the same answer. It is an interesting coincidence.
3 men knew where it was. 3 men died before they could say. Alfred Rode, director of the Königsberg Museum in East Prussia, the last documented custodian of the object, was arrested by Soviet intelligence in January 1946. He died before his interrogation could begin. Typhus, according to official records. His wife died 2 days later from the same cause. No autopsy was performed on either body. General Ivan Yusupov, the Soviet officer assigned to locate the object after the war, died in a car accident. His files were sealed by the state security apparatus. Georg Stein, a West German civilian investigator who spent decades tracking the trail through Cold War archives and former German officer interviews, was found in a Bavarian forest in 1987. He had been stabbed with his own scalpel. What they were all looking for was the Amber Room. Created in 1701 for the Prussian King Frederick I, the room was constructed from 6 metric tons of amber panels backed with gold foil and inlaid with mirrors and gemstones. Given to Peter the Great of Russia as a diplomatic gift in 1716, it took 18 specialists 11 years to install it in the Catherine Palace at Tsarskoye Selo. It was called the 8th wonder of the world. In September 1941, a German technical team dismantled it in 36 hours. 27 crates were shipped east to Königsberg. And then, in the final chaos of April 1945, the crates vanished. The official theory? The room burned when British bombers firebombed Königsberg. Amber burns slowly and leaves a distinctive chemical signature in ash. Forensic analysis of the castle rubble has never produced that signature. In 2025, Polish researchers received governmental authorization to drill into a sealed bunker complex near Dziemiany, acting on statements made decades earlier by Erich Koch, the Nazi regional administrator of East Prussia, before his death in a Polish prison. The drilling is ongoing. What is absent from public statements about the search is what German technical logs from September 1941 recorded when the panels were dismantled. Certain panels had been modified. A cavity approximately 3 centimeters deep running behind specific sections. The logs described the contents as administrative documents. Those logs were classified by Soviet intelligence in 1946. They were partially declassified in 2007. The partial declassification describes the contents as of strategic value. It does not say what they were. Funding dried up for independent investigations through the 1990s. Several key witnesses died before formal testimony could be recorded. The most promising leads were sealed into national archives that require governmental authorization to access. The people who knew the answer kept dying before they could give it. Edward Heron Allen was not a man who believed in curses. He was a scientist, a marine biologist, a lawyer, a violinist, and one of the foremost Persian manuscript translators of his generation. A close friend of Oscar Wilde, a man who believed in evidence above all other things. In 1892, someone gave him a stone, an oval gemstone set in silver, engraved with alchemical and astrological symbols. It had been stolen from a temple dedicated to Indra, the Hindu god of war and storms, during the British suppression of the Indian Revolt of 1857. A Colonel Ferris had carried it back to England, gone bankrupt, and fallen gravely ill. His son inherited the stone and the debts. A singer who borrowed the stone from the son reportedly lost her voice permanently and never recovered it. Heron Allen took it. He was going to study it. Within a year, he described the following period of his life as a cascade of misfortunes. He attempted to give the stone to a female friend. Her circumstances deteriorated within months. He took it back. He threw it into the Regent's Canal in London. 3 months later, a dredger pulled it from the water and returned it to him. At that point, Edward Heron Allen, the man of evidence, had it placed in a bank vault. He wrote a sealed letter to accompany it, instructed that it not be opened for 3 years after his death, and donated both to the Natural History Museum in London in 1943. The stone was to be enclosed in 7 progressively smaller nested boxes. The innermost held the stone. The letter was unsealed in 1946. It described the stone's history in careful, rational terms. It ended with the following sentence: "Whoever shall then open it shall first read out this warning, and then do with the jewel as it seems good to them." The museum catalogued the stone eventually, placed it in secure storage.
In 2004, curator John Whitaker was transporting it to an exhibition in Yorkshire when his vehicle was caught in an abnormally severe storm on the road. The same week, he underwent surgery to remove kidney stones. He told journalists afterward, "Whether or not there's anything to it, it makes you think." There is one more detail. This stone is not a sapphire. It is an amethyst. Colonel Ferris was not a gemologist. He called it a sapphire, the name entered circulation, and it has been wrong ever since. The actual stone is a large oval amethyst with 2 carved scarab beetles on its silver setting. Scarabs are the ancient Egyptian symbol of rebirth. The 7 boxes are in the museum's storage room in London. The wax-sealed letter is in the archive. The stone is available for formal researcher access. Almost no one has asked.
It is written in the Chronicles of the Mughal Empire, "He who owns this diamond will own the world, but will also know all its misfortunes. Only God or a woman can wear it with impunity." Whoever wrote that down was not composing poetry. They were recording a pattern they had already observed over several generations. The Koh-i-Noor, Mountain of Light in Persian, is a diamond of 105.6 carats, with a verified ownership history stretching back to 1526. Every male ruler who possessed it after that date died in circumstances that were, at minimum, catastrophic. Shah Jahan, who built the Taj Mahal, was overthrown by his own son and spent his final years in captivity, permitted to see the Taj Mahal only as a reflection in a small mirror because he could no longer walk to the window. Nadir Shah, the Persian ruler who extorted the stone from the Mughal emperor by threatening civilian massacre, was assassinated 8 years after taking it. Ahmed Shah Durrani, who received the stone next, died from a disease that destroyed his face. His grandson was blinded by a political rival. In 1849, the East India Company removed the diamond from an 11-year-old boy. Maharaja Duleep Singh, last of the Sikh Empire, signed the Treaty of Lahore under conditions that can only be described as coercion. The treaty contains 10 numbered clauses. Clause 4 deals exclusively with the Koh-i-Noor. Not grouped with other assets. Not described as jewelry. Named separately. Required separately. Surrendered separately. The stone was not treated in the legal text as a possession. It was treated as a title deed to India itself. The company was dissolved 8 years later after the uprising of 1857. The stone has since been worn only by women of the British royal family. No comparable pattern of catastrophic outcome has followed them. The female immunity clause, described in what are supposed to be the original Mughal chronicles, cannot be traced to any pre-British source. The earliest reference to it appears in a colonial administrator's notes from 1851, 2 years after the Treaty of Lahore. Personally, I think that clause was invented retroactively. Someone needed an explanation for why Queen Victoria, and not her husband Prince Albert, was wearing something that had killed every previous male owner. They found one, and they placed it in the historical record after the fact. 4 countries currently claim the stone: India, Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan. Each has submitted formal requests for its return. Each request has been declined. In 2023, King Charles III received a cancer diagnosis during preparations for his coronation. The timing was noted in Indian media. The British Foreign Office did not comment. It glows red. A blue diamond, 45.52 carats, behind 3 inches of bulletproof glass in the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. When placed under ultraviolet light, glows with a deep red phosphorescence for approximately 60 seconds after the light source is removed. Not blue, red. The color of blood, the color of fire. For 60 seconds, this stone continues to broadcast after you stop looking at it. This is not mythology. This is physics. The United States Naval Research Laboratory confirmed in 2010 that the Hope Diamond is a natural Type 2b semiconductor, a boron-doped crystal that conducts electricity and heat more efficiently than modern silicon components. The interaction of boron and nitrogen atoms in the crystal lattice produces the red phosphorescence. The boron concentration varies between 0 and 8 parts per million, making this one of the most precisely characterized natural materials ever analyzed. It formed in the Earth's mantle 1.1 billion years ago. It was mined from the Kolar mines of India and purchased by a French merchant named Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, who sold it to King Louis XIV in 1666. The legend says Tavernier was torn apart by wolves in Russia. This is almost certainly not true. It was a story circulated by the jeweler Pierre Cartier when selling the diamond to American socialite Evelyn Walsh McLean in 1910. Cartier understood what he was marketing. The documented record is considerably more uncomfortable than the legend. Marie Antoinette wore the stone. She was executed. Her closest companion, the Princesse de Lamballe, was killed by a mob. The stone disappeared for 20 years during the Revolution, reappeared in London under its current name, and began a new chain of ownership. McLean wore it around Washington for 3 decades and called it her good luck charm. Her son was killed in a car accident. Her daughter died of a drug overdose.
Her husband was committed to a psychiatric institution. The Washington Post, which she owned, was sold to cover her debts after her death. In 1958, the jeweler Harry Winston donated the diamond to the Smithsonian Institution. He shipped it by standard postal mail. The postal carrier who made the delivery, James Todd, broke his leg in a truck accident shortly afterward. His wife died of a heart attack. His dog died. His house burned down. The red glow lasts 62 seconds on average across multiple laboratory measurements. 62 seconds of red light from a blue stone in a dark room after the lamp cuts out. Someone timed it first. Someone was the first person to hold this stone under a light source and watch it turn the color of blood. A Mughal court official, a French gem merchant, a revolutionary who stripped it from a dead queen's neck. One of them stood in a dark room and watched this happen and had no vocabulary for what they were looking at. A diamond does not glow red. And yet, for 62 seconds, this one does. 11 million people stand in front of it each year. Most of them see a beautiful blue stone and move on. They don't know about the red glow. They don't know what it actually is. The pattern, if you want to call it one, is this. Every object in this investigation was more than what it appeared. A tomb was a biolab. A pair of horns was a weapon system. A diamond was a semiconductor. A ring was a lawsuit. And in every case, the people who approached without understanding what they held paid a price the official record quietly filed under coincidence. The reasons got lost. The mechanisms didn't. Most people encounter this history in museum gift shops, in documentary specials, and move on. They look, they don't ask what the second function was. You stayed until the end. That tells me something. Pick one. Any object on this list. Tell me in the comments what you think its actual function was. Not its official label, its real purpose. The most convincing case gets pinned. And if you want to know about the 3 objects that almost made this list, one of which has been sitting in the basement of a European museum since 1923, cataloged as decorative miscellany, subscribe. That basement is sealed. The catalog number has been redacted from the public index. I'll find it.